Series. Excited to have Saeed Abu-Nimeh with us today, CEO and co-founder of SecLytics. Saeed, thanks for joining us and doing this.
Thank you, Eron. Appreciate it. Pleasure is mine.
So where I'd like to start is for our Innovate community. I'd love to talk about your background prior to SecLytics. I understand you were a distinguished scientist at PayPal and then a security researcher at WebSense. So it sounds like you've been in industry for a long time here understanding threats.
Yes, absolutely. So I've been in the space for more than 25 years or so. I did my PhD prior to joining the industry, leveraging machine learning in cybersecurity. This was in 2008. I also did my postdoc at Carnegie Mellon after that, working on different projects funded by the DoD, and started working at WebSense as a security researcher. We did a lot of security research related to web-based attacks. I also worked at a company called Damballa. We did a lot of DNS security work. And lastly, PayPal, I was a distinguished scientist, worked on a lot of fraud-related issues by leveraging both my knowledge in the malware space, security space, and the fraud space as well. So,
got it. Sounds like you were around in the early days of the OWASP top 10. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Which sadly is still relevant today. But that's a topic for another time.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So sounds like you were doing a lot of interesting work. What made you want to stop helping these large entities secure their enterprises and start your own security company?
Yeah, I noticed the need for being more proactive in the industry. When we worked at WebSense or Damballa or even at PayPal, we were always waiting for the attack to happen, and then we responded. So the idea behind SecLytics was leveraging everything we learned throughout the years to become more proactive, more predictive, and hopefully be a step ahead or two steps ahead the bad guys. Instead of waiting for the attack to be launched and then we wait for the malware or the malicious URL or what have you, reverse it, dissect it, or run it in a DOM. Usually this is too late. The goal behind SecLytics was to say, okay, we know a lot about cyber criminal groups. Can we build a platform to help us be ahead of these cyber criminals? And this is the main idea behind SecLytics.
Right. And if I'm thinking back to 2014, you either had the signature for a threat or you didn't, and there really wasn't much in between. Is that an accurate characterization of where the industry was at the time?
Yeah, so we leveraged back then in 2014 or even before then, a lot of signature-based detection. There were early uses of machine learning and training models on what we knew back then, the known bad. And the goal was to build models to hopefully find unknown bad.
Right.
And it was too early back then for things like this. So, when we started, we leveraged most of the work that was done until 2012 or so, 2014.
Yeah. So, so you big leap of faith to solve a big problem. Talk to me about, at the time, I don't know that the industry was mature where you had these buckets of SIM and SOAR and threat intel companies. How did you look at the company that you were building, and how do you look at it now in terms of where you sit in this ecosystem of companies that, sort of fill a need that each customer needs to secure themselves?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. When we started, we focused mainly on data feeds because, as you mentioned, a lot of companies were not mature in their security stack like they are today. So our assumption was that, our theory was that, hey, we will develop this data feed that is proactive and people will know what to do with it. Of course, we were wrong. a lot of people didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Then we started building integrations with people's SIMs. SOAR was relatively new back then in 2014. Not a lot of companies had SOAR technologies. Back then, it was the early days of Phantom, Demisto, and a couple of other SOARs, but not a lot of people had SOARs back then. But we worked with a lot of SIMs. Splunk was the major one that a lot of companies had. And now it's different. People have their CrowdStrike EDR or SentinelOne EDR. Of course, they have their firewalls, web gateways, email gateways. But when we started, it was a simple assumption. Hey, data feed, give it to people. They will know what to do with it. It wasn't the case. We ended up building more than 50 integrations with different security products.
Yeah. You're in an interesting position, right? Every cybersecurity company now like collects massive amounts of data, and they might call themselves a SIM or an EDR or whatever. But at the end of the day, they collect massive amounts of data and try to do interesting things with it. It sounds like you guys are that interesting thing, right? Like you guys are sort of have that sauce of taking that data and actually finding threats. Can maybe like talk about, if I've got a if I'm a company and I've got my Splunk and my CrowdStrike, like, how do you guys think of yourselves in that ecosystem, and what do you bring that their alerting can't do?
Yeah. So our mission is simple. The enterprise invested in their security stack. We are not here to tell them, oh, you made a bad decision here, you need to replace this or that. We will integrate with that security stack to make it predictive and to make it proactive. When we generate our intelligence, we don't rely on any of the customer's data. We sit outside of the network, we monitor what's happening on the internet, and we find where cyber criminals are setting up infrastructure. And then we take that intelligence and integrate it into the security stack for the customer, into their SIM, into their EDR, into their firewalls, into their web proxies, email gateways, and what have you. And the goal is, as I mentioned, they already made the investment, they bought these technologies, we integrate with it, and we make it predictive. Yeah. So that's the whole idea behind what we do and how we fit in that whole ecosystem.
I assume that because you guys are monitoring, internet traffic and ways to try to understand where threat actors are setting up shop, that when there is a correlation, say firewall and an endpoint and something you have, the correlations are strong, and there's it's almost like, okay, this is an incident. This goes straight past a level 1 analyst. This goes straight to there's an investigation here. Is that an accurate way to think about it?
Yep. So what we do is that when we push the intel into their environment, we integrate into their, let's say, SIM. And then there will be a trigger in the SIM. The event in the SIM will match against an indicator of attack that we pushed. And then the customer will see that both in our dashboard, in our cloud-based dashboard, and in the SIM, where we also have dashboards that we built for most of the SIMs. When they see that, then there are two things that can happen here. If the customer enabled automated blocking and enforcement in our platform, then we have pre-built playbooks that will get executed and will take an action at the firewall level, email gateway level, endpoint level, and we will start blocking. If the customer didn't have this enabled, then the customer has to do a manual enforcement, if you will. They will have to go to their security control and take an action there.
Got it. So you're not just, when I think of integrating with vendors, I think of consuming data, I think of maybe pushing back, alerts or tickets, and then I think of API integration. It sounds like you guys are hitting all three in order to take those automated actions.
Yeah, definitely. So we do the detection, we do the enrichment piece, and we do the enforcement piece, the response. Yeah. Very
cool. Very cool. It sounds like you can also solve some although you probably don't want to describe yourself as a SOAR, but you end up sort of solving some SOAR-like tasks for people that maybe are tricky to do.
That's absolutely correct, especially like if you go mid-market and below, where people do not even want to do with the SOAR or do not have the budget to buy a SOAR. They leverage our platform for automation. We call it automation. Right. Because we integrate with SOAR platforms, right?
Right. In this space, it's like you're in maybe one silo, but you have to like do 10% in every silo to have a complete product. It just comes with the territory.
Exactly. I was talking to one of the SIM companies maybe like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And the person who was responsible for their ecosystem told me, I think most of the partners we have in our ecosystem page, we compete with them one way or another, but we don't want to think about it as competition. You want to think of it as we are all here to do one thing, which is to protect the enterprise and to make the world a safer place. So.
That's right. Maybe from a business perspective, they're frenemies. Is that maybe a fair word?
Yeah, that's a cool word. The first time I hear it, but it's absolutely accurate. Yes.
Yeah. So I want to close with sort of a predictive question. I'm curious both where you think, from what you see out there of threat actors' behavior, where they're headed, and where you guys are headed to prevent companies from getting popped by them. Where's this headed? Because it feels like it's evolving fast this year.
Yeah. So if you look at most of the attacks that happened like in 2010 or even before then, the bad guys exploited vulnerabilities in systems and then they infected a lot of users by exploiting these vulnerabilities. For example, when we were at WebSense, we saw a lot of attacks delivered through a vulnerable browser if someone visited CNN.com, for example. Right. The bad guys exploited the vulnerability in that server, and then they delivered their malware. Then the bad guys started evolving, right? They found that, now I can host my stuff on AWS or on DigitalOcean or Google Cloud. And then the cloud-based providers started getting better, and they started taking the malicious infrastructure down quickly. So the bad guys started going to hosting providers in Europe, in Eastern Europe, and Latin America, where they can have an uptime that's greater than a couple of hours. And of course, they leverage bulletproof hosters and what have you. So if you look at it, like every time the bad guys do something, we catch up, and then the bad guys keep evolving. It's going to be an unending battle. So nowadays, we see a lot of attacks leveraging cloud infrastructure. Identity is a huge problem now. So when you have compromised credentials, people are leveraging them to basically get through that attack vector into the enterprise environment. So I think identity will be huge. Cloud will be huge for the next couple of years, and we will still need to do a better job protecting these assets as an enterprise.
Right. Great. And I assume you guys will keep sort of trending with those attackers and finding where they're hiding next.
Of course. Otherwise, we will be unemployed, right? If we don't catch up, we will lose the battle. So every time they come up with new tactics, our models will have to evolve and detect these abnormalities, if you will, new patterns, and hopefully we will stay ahead of them every time they do something.
That's great. Well, I'd love to chat more. I will see you at Innovate in Scottsdale, and looking forward to it. We'll catch up more.
We'll see you in Scottsdale. Yep. Thank you. Take care. Thank you for having me.